Okay, and we're gonna go live. Okay. Hello, Rob. Let me just say hi and check that we are live right now. So give me 1 second. Yes, we are live. Thank you for joining us today and for your willingness to share your view about adaptation and how is it important in today's world.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for setting up this interview, Marta. I am, yes, a big fan of adaptation. It's been a core value in my life, being able to fluidly move from one situation to another as change has happened. I've had quite a few years of opportunity to adapt to change. And I noticed that with that capability, driven largely from PSYCH-K, because I can change my perception of things on a long-term basis, on a sustainable basis, at the subconscious level of the mind, that's what promotes sustainable change. Reading a book, I get inspired. Seeing a movie, sometimes I can be inspired by other people's actions and their courage and their clarity and their wisdom. But to internalize it totally, that's what PSYCH-K is about. That's why I have continued for so many years to be a part of this beautiful thought form that was given to me in 1989, or 88 actually.
Oh.
And 88, 89 is when the patterns sort of began their transmission to my consciousness. And then I knew very well this was my life purpose. At 40 years old, I finally figured out what I was supposed to do. And so at that age, it was a definite awakening. And adapting to the changes that I had to go through was key. So I'm glad that the subject today is adaptation.
Yes, there's so much that's been going on in the last 3 months in this world. It's mesmerizing when we consider how much we've been able to fit in the last 3 months as huge shifts in how we are invited to view our experience as human beings. So could you share a little bit of how you see this in the light of the PSYCH-K world?
Sure. What I see is that in the really big picture, we are in a transition period, a mega transition, a 26,000-year cycle. Not 2 weeks, not 2 months, not 3 months, not years. 26,000-year cycle. And we're coming to the end of that cycle. And this is when everything becomes more or less transparent. Whatever has been hidden or is below the surface of consciousness is showing up. And a lot of it isn't pretty at all. So the whole point of this is to face the realities that we see and be adaptable, be able to change them and change ourselves in order to change them, to create a better world. People talking about this coronavirus thing is, oh, I can't wait to get back to normal. I hope we never go back to normal. Normal is what's created virtually all of these problems that we're facing in the world right now. So I want a new normal. I want something that's a higher order of intelligence and a higher order of opportunity and potentiality to reign here, not to go back to what was normal and then go back to sleep as if we're just stuck in this old level of programming. We need a new level of programming. If we're going to solve problems that are in healthcare, in government, in politics, in law enforcement, in every aspect of our society, the educational system has to be revamped. There's nothing that's major in the world that I see that doesn't need our undivided attention and our conscientious effort to raise everything up to a new level of awareness.
Yeah, and how do we do that?
Well, each of us is the how do we do it. The we is the operative word there. Everybody needs to get involved. This transition that we're going through, this epic evolutionary consciousness raising opportunity, involves each of us. We are the consciousness that needs to be raised. So first of all, look at your part in it. Look at your belief systems especially. How do you view the world? Do you view it as a bunch of separate things that are operating independently of each other, or do you see interconnection anywhere? Because if you don't see the interconnection, then you're not seeing the fact of life. The appearances are separation. The reality is connectedness, interconnectedness. That's another one of the principles of nature. And interconnectedness points to another principle called diversity. Diversity is what we need in order to create a society that ultimately works in the long run. It's like in agriculture, building monocrops where it's the same sort of corn or the same sort of bean or the same sort of potato ends up being a disastrous proposition, because what makes you strong and what makes it possible to live and thrive is our diversity in the world. And in our case with human beings, the diversity of human thought, the diversity of cultures, the diversity in attitudes and values and beliefs, all of those can strengthen us and ultimately lead us to seeing the interconnectedness, which is very important, because if we don't do that, then we can hurt other people with impunity. In our own minds, we think we're not hurting ourselves, which is a complete lie. We can hurt the earth and think that we're not hurting ourselves. It's just a commodity. Big lie. We are part of the earth. We're an extension of the earth. We're an extension of each other. And my worldview specifically is that we're spiritual beings first and foremost, and we're having a human experience. And where the problems occur are at the human experience level, because we're not guided by our spirits. We're not guided by our higher consciousness, our higher wisdom. It's all around us. It's in the principles of nature, for instance. If we lived our lives according to those principles, we would have a very different world, practically overnight. If we understood that when we meet another person, regardless of gender, creed, color, socioeconomic condition, that's another divine being, an expression of the divine in physical form. Now, to the extent that people don't recognize that divine expression, it can be pretty distorted. It can be pretty awful. Yeah. But that's why what we do, and why I characterize PSYCH-K as largely a spiritual process with psychological and physical benefits. So if we come from that place of recognition of the divinity in each of us, then we can make changes in quite miraculous ways.
I guess the difference here is we can think about these things and we can try to go about it with our will and positive mind and affirmations. And I know I did my fair share of all those. And the difference when we can actually interiorize all that you're talking now from the subconscious point of view, that's what makes it, let's say, easier. It's a challenge to see our world as it is right now, and it is for all of us. It can be painful, it can be sad, but there's a side of this that it's very hopeful. That's how I keep my hope through PSYCH-K. Can you speak a little bit about this?
Yeah, well, I'm certainly not exempt from those feelings. The death of George Floyd, as an example, touched me deeply. I was very angered and frustrated about that. And I'm not the only one, of course, and not just the Black community, but the community, the global community. This was a tragedy, not just a tragedy for the Black community. It's a tragedy for humanity.
Right.
The fact that we can live in a world that can create that kind of experience, that kind of travesty of the human condition, is just some days beyond me. I just want to spend some time in the fetal position and think, oh my God, it's never going to get better. And then I wake up and I realize that no, it is going to get better, but we all have to get involved. Everybody that can and is awake enough to make a difference in this world, whatever tools you use, we happen to be using the PSYCH-K tools, use those tools from concentrated prayer to kindness in the world. Be kind to yourself, be kind to other people, be kind to the earth, be kind to animals. Try kindness. It's the Dalai Lama once said, my philosophy is kindness. It's plain and simple. And I'm saying, let's start there. Maybe that would be nice. Let's be courteous and calm and conscientiously kind to each other for a while. See how that feels, as opposed to feeling that everybody's your enemy and you're in the protection mode all the time. Yeah, you're going to get hurt once in a while when you're in protection and you feel vulnerable and the other person isn't in the space that you'd like them to be and you would like to be. But I found over the course of my life anyway, that I'd rather be in that situation demonstrating how I want other people to respond to me by being that way. In other words, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. So approach the situation like that. Use discretion, common sense. If it's a volatile situation and you can't handle that, then extricate yourself from the situation. But whenever you have the abilities and the courage to stand your ground, and kindness and love are going to be your lead invitation to another human being and another human interaction, I think you are doing your part. Be the change is what Gandhi said. So I don't think that's just a euphemism. I think that's a fact. If you want the world to change, demonstrate how you want other people to be. You invite them that way to be at a higher order of exchange in the human condition. This is 3D reality. This isn't actually who we are, but this is how we print it out. So we can change it. Look at how quickly the world changed when they announced this coronavirus.
It's amazing.
Well, we went from a society of interaction and mobility and waking up in the morning, and for most people anyway, kind of glad to get awake, and here's another day. That's not true of a whole lot of people. Millions of people on the planet understand that, and that's a sad fact that needs to be changed as well. So we need to see that we are those people. We are the change that we seek, and to do what we can. It doesn't matter how small or how big the opportunity is, take it. Take it when you can. Sometimes the best you can do is smile at somebody, but that gift can change people's lives. That gift can lift their spirits. If you're in a position to affect more people and more change in a positive way, then I think it's your moral obligation to do so.
Absolutely. I find it fascinating how fast we were able to be reprogrammed in so many ways.
That's right.
Yet, when you talk about the individual and how we're feeling inside, that reprogramming has been experienced in very difficult ways. I'm talking about myself, even of how doing PSYCH-K, I could see, yes, I want to live this experience in peace, but there was parts of me saying, yeah, but I want also my mobility and I want my freedom. Yes.
Right.
Why is it hard for us to adapt fast?
Well, I think if all we've got is access to our conscious mind, adaptation is much more difficult than if we have access to our subconscious mind. I mean, the statistics about the subconscious and conscious mind are obvious in terms of neuroscience now. At the subconscious level, we're having thoughts that drive actions that are derived from the subconscious mind. The sub means below. So below the level of your conscious awareness, at least 95% of the time, current neuroscience says your next thought and therefore your next behavior will come from that level of your mind. You're unaware of what is promoting the next thought and the next behavior. It's out of your conscious awareness. Only about 5% of the time are you operating at the conscious level. So for me to be enthusiastic about something I hear or some new idea I learn about and then moving into action is a lot less likely if that new information is not internalized at the subconscious level of my mind. That's why this work is so important and why I'm so delighted that so many people around the world know how to do PSYCH-K. And not only do you have to know how to do it with just an individual one-on-one, but you can do surrogation. That's the process, of course, of being able to do PSYCH-K long distance. And you can do it for the collective consciousness of humanity. So in this surrogate process, you become a stand-in as one individual for the collective consciousness of however many higher selves opt into this opportunity to use the PSYCH-K thought form through you to make changes in their world. And we do this individually. We do it with the Gaia Project, which is a consciousness opportunity to help to shape how all this is going to turn out, where we're going as a society, and to lift us to a new level of awareness, consciousness, and ultimately potential. mean, I really think this whole virus thing should be called the virus of opportunity. It's a pandemic of opportunity. Maybe that's a better way to say it. And it's worldwide. We have a chance here because of this seemingly bad thing that can be turned into a very useful, precipitous event that creates change. Bruce Lipton talks about crisis precipitates evolution. And he's right, of course, that oftentimes, unfortunately, it takes some very unpleasant situations, circumstances to happen before we wake up enough to say, oh my, we have to change that. But when we do, and when it's emotionally connected, and when it's at the subconscious level that we get this idea, then the next thought and the next action ends up being one that promotes change, as opposed to one that goes into fear, paralyzed by that fear, and no change takes place. So that's really the big difference between the conscious mind's awareness of an injustice, let's say, in the world, because there's plenty of injustices all over the globe. This is not new.
Right.
But the injustice can be, when it hits you personally, it's going to be a lot more motivational, shall we say, than if you think it's happening to someone else. And the ultimate change that can happen here is we start to realize there is no such thing as somebody else.
Exactly.
You know, in many other cultures, Marta, the older than this one in the West, in the United States, where I happen to live, they have ways of greeting each other. That these greetings, nested inside these greetings, is the awareness I'm talking about, the one that we are all from the same divine source, and that the first thing we recognize is what we have in common, not what's different about us. So acknowledge that, then you can talk about your differences. So in, say, India, they use the term which we are familiar with in the United States mostly, namaste, which means the divinity in me recognizes and honors the divinity in you. In the Mayan culture, they have a phrase, Inlakesh, means, roughly translated, hello, I'm another you. We have in Africa, Itaizen, which means, how is your soul doing today? So the first acknowledgement and connection there is to soul. It's not to personality.
Right.
Grüß Gott in German, greetings, God. So it's acknowledging that what you're seeing and greeting is the divine in that other person. In the Hawaiian tradition, aloha, which usually we think means hello and goodbye or whatever. No, actually, you break the word down in the Hawaiian language and it means, I recognize and honor the breath of God in you.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So it's these ancient cultures that haven't been so industrialized, they are now, but they weren't then in their beginnings, have this intrinsic knowing that we're all interconnected. In the Lakota tradition, Mitakwe Oaisen is the phrase they use when they're going to do ritual, and it means all my relations. They're calling in all the relations, and they don't mean just human relations like we would probably normally think of. All their relations are the things that fly, the things that swim, the things that crawl on the earth, everything they're related to. There's nothing that's not a part of them. We've so lost that in the Western world. We so think in terms of disconnect and separateness when that's not the way it actually is. Quantum physics would call it quantum entanglement. And they can show in the most sophisticated, advanced science we have on the planet that we in fact are all interconnected. And it's not just a phrase. And in the powerful religious and spiritual traditions of history, the whole notion of the law of one, that we are all interconnected. Nothing is really separate from the divine thought that created it. I will say one thing about a personal experience I had it was some years ago now, and I was trying to learn to meditate well. I've never been good at that. Busy mind or whatever it is. But I had read about this approach that sounded like I might be able to pull it off. And it was, again, of course, with eyes closed and settled in and all that. And you were to say, who am I? Who am I? And just repeat it like a mantra. And then in between the who am I's, the idea was the answer would come. Who am I? Well, I'm doing the who am I silently to myself and listening for an answer, not getting anything. And so, so all of a sudden, I was unaware of what I was saying. For a moment, the words went away, my mind wandered, as it usually does, to other things. And all of a sudden, when I checked back in, I wasn't saying, who am I anymore? I was saying, what am I? It had morphed below my level of conscious awareness into those words. What am I? What am? And as soon as I said it once, twice, I don't remember, but it wasn't more than 3 times, I did get an answer. And the answer was profound, and it changed the way I thought about myself and everyone else. The answer was, you are a thought in the mind of God.
That's beautiful.
And then of course I was thinking, oh, well, that's me. And then it was, no, it's all people. And then, no, it's not just people, it's everything. Mm-hmm. Everything in creation is a thought manifesting in 3-dimensional reality. So your core is the spiritual core. And that's why all these ancient religions and spiritual practices had some version of a greeting that first and foremost acknowledged our connectedness, our interconnectedness, and our divinity, that we come from the same source. That makes it, if you believe that, you know it, not just consciously, but in every fiber of your being, the subconscious level of the mind as an example, you can't hurt anything else or anyone else on purpose. Which clearly we see evidence that not everyone understands that. And not everyone has evolved to that state where you recognize that's the way things actually are. You're letting your senses lie to you. And Einstein called that a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. I love that phrase. That the fact that we're separate from anything is actually a delusion of our optics. We see things and our sensory apparatus tells us it's separate, but everything else below that sensory system says, no, we're all interconnected. The tree is just as much my brother. The bee is just as much my sister as you are or anybody else. So once that feeling of wholeness and oneness is a part of our very being, then all these other symptoms that we see, all the cruelty in the world, all of the craziness that we just scratch our heads and say, how can that happen? How can people do that to each other? Goes away. There is no way to be in that consciousness and do what we see being done on this planet now.
And I think what you just said is very important to emphasize, because before I did PSYCH-K, I read the books. I had an intellectual knowledge of everything that you're just saying. You know, it's everywhere. But one thing is reading about it or knowing about it. Another thing is believing it at the subconscious level of mind.
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes you. At the subconscious level, it becomes you. It's your habit of thinking, which drives the behaviors, which the books or whatever kind of inspiration you've gathered and wisdom that you have can print out. So in 3-dimensional reality, effortlessly. It's not, oh my God, I said that again, cancel, that whole routine that we did in the 60s. It's not that. The idea never formulates itself because you have a new operating system, a new program. You don't turn on your computer once you've upgraded it and have it mysteriously go back to some ancient version of your software. Every time you rewrite the software of your mind, you change the printout of your life. And so you can think of it in that metaphorically as an operating system. It's a biological operating system, but it's the same principle. Once I change the operating system, this is my new way of seeing things. These other things never occur to me. You don't have to cancel them. They simply don't come up. Can you remember them? Yeah, sure. This doesn't cause forgetting that I used to be a different way, but it means your lead thought and your lead behavior changes according to your updated wisdom. That's what this is all about. That's why I refer to it as a spiritual process with psychological benefits. Mm-hmm. I see it that way. It is my journey. It is my spiritual practice. And so I'm not good at other aspects of that, like meditation in a formal way. But when I walk in nature, that is my meditation. The spirit comes to me between the thoughts. And just like I just gave the example of when I was saying, who am I? And it morphed into what am I? And I immediately got the answer. That reality changed a lot for me. And of course, I balanced for that. I checked to see if my subconscious mind got that. In this particular case, it did. But had it not, and my muscle response would have been weak to that statement as I affirmed it, I would have used PSYCH-K to balance for it, internalize it in just a few minutes, and then have the advantage of that in my system for the rest of my existence on this planet.
Yeah. And in my experience in the past 3 months especially, and I do love the principles of nature. They've been part of my life since I started to do PSYCH-K, and you introduced those to us in 2012. These past months, they have become even more relevant.
Yes. Yeah, as the system as we know it crashes, comes apart, as much of it needs to, in my opinion, for transformation. You can't fill a cup until it's empty, or until it's emptied to a point where it has room for something new. And these, in this case, it's our thoughts and attitudes and values and perceptions and distortions of reality, all these things. Not all beliefs are helpful. That's why being able to change them is so important. So I just think that if people understand that change is possible, we've seen it happen in a very short period of time, massive change. Had you said that life would be like this, 8-10 months ago, you would have said, no, everybody's not going to be wearing masks and staying home, and you can't travel from one place to another. All the businesses are closed and all this stuff. We would have said, you're crazy. But look what happened. So if we didn't have to do it that way through crisis, but if joy and creative thought and the awareness of what needs to be changed was sufficient for motivation, we could get about doing that in a hurry. The solutions are right there. But if we can't see them because of our distorted belief systems, it's going to take a heck of a lot longer to make the necessary change we need to make our society a society for everyone, not a society for a few.
Absolutely. So the people who are watching, some know about PSYCH-K, some don't. Could you explain how they can access PSYCH-K to interiorize all this in their lives?
Well, that's pretty simple. That's just go to the PSYCH-K website and read. It's got everything there that you're going to want to know about PSYCH-K to see if you resonate with what this work is. It's not for everybody. Nothing is for everybody. Right. And it's not a bullet cure where you just take a pill and then you feel better and everything's great. But it is a way to take control of your life in a way that I haven't found anything that works better, faster, is more elegant in its operation, simpler to do, that still works, and has such, I would say, a core integrity to it, because it frees minds. It doesn't trap them. It's not telling, we never tell you what to believe. We tell you how you can believe what you want. You choose that. That's the free will aspect of it. We should always have that. So to me, I've got 31 years of experience of using PSYCH-K in my life, and I can tell you that on balance, what it did for me was that my lows in life, which I still have occasionally, are much higher than they used to be. And my highs are much higher than they used to be. So the whole scale of emotional experience, physical experience, has graduated to a new level, a new elevation, so to speak, that is priceless to me. So I'm still very much here and very much participating in this very exciting time of the evolution of consciousness of the human species and of Earth itself. So I know I chose this time to be here. I feel very much akin to what's going on, as difficult as it is. I know that there is nothing but up to go. It may look bad and may look worse before it gets better. But if we hang in here and everybody does their part, whatever it is, like I said, a little or a lot, we can reshape society and call out what our destiny will be. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. I think we are here to create a future that we all want, that makes more sense than the one that we've created so far.
Absolutely. Any final comment that you would like to make to those watching before we leave, Rob?
Well, what comes to mind is the dedication that I put in the PSYCH-K book called PSYCH-K, The Missing Piece in Your Life. And the dedication really wasn't for an individual, it was for all of humanity. And it's sort of a blessing. And I would offer this to all the people that are listening. May you recognize your divinity, discover your greatness, and become the peace you seek. That is my wish for all of us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you to all of you who have been watching and being here with us for everything that each of us do in our own way. And if PSYCH-K is your way, we will see you in a workshop or in a private session. And we keep walking.
Thanks for sharing your time. Everybody that's listening, I appreciate it. Time's the most precious thing we have. It's the most precious gift you can share. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob. Bye, everybody.